Hey, it's Mistress Carrie, reporting for duty from MCHQ for episode 141 of the Mistress Carrie podcast. And before we get to this week's guest, Mark Tremonti, I wanted to remind you about all of the features of MistressCarrie.com. Not only can you find every full-length episode of the Mistress Carrie podcast, every sit rep, and every episode of my video show, Cocktails in the War Room, but you can also check out my blog, shop in the official online Mistress Carrie store, and you can check out the concert calendar that's constantly getting updated with new tours and shows that are getting announced. Find all that and more at MistressCarrie.com. My guest this week, Mark Tremonti, is a guitar player, a singer, and a songwriter, best known for his bands Alter Bridge, Tremonti, and Creed. He was in town recently on tour with Alter Bridge and Mammoth WVH and Red. The band is supporting their latest release, Pawns and Kings. So Mark and I sat down to talk about a lot of stuff, including his new love of power washing, his album of Frank Sinatra covers that he recorded for charity, his experiences with fatherhood, his charity work, being back out on the road with Alter Bridge, his songwriting process, collaborating with singer and guitar player Myles Kennedy, his life's work in raising Down syndrome awareness, his new challenge for John Connolly from Seven Dust to run the Boston Marathon. We talked about his guitars, and we talked about guitar legends Eddie Van Halen and Jeff Beck, and so much more. Mark is definitely one of the hardest working guys in rock, and I was really happy that he was able to find time in his schedule to sit down and hang out with me. So, allow me to introduce you to Mark Tremonti.
Hey, what's up? This is Sully from Godsmack. Strap on those boots, baby, because you are now in the trenches of the war room with the one and only Mistress Carrie right here on the Mistress Carrie podcast.
What's up? This is Joe Rogan, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Her hair so lovely, pretty eyes.
Hey, this is Brent from Shinedown, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie. Hey, Carrie, go put your bra on, girl.
Hey, this is Steven Tyler, and you be listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
What's up? This is Aaron from Stain, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Hi, everybody. This is Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and you're listening to the one, the only Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is David from the band Disturbed, and you're listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
Hi, Bruce Dickinson here from Iron Maiden. Yes, indeed, Miss Whiplash herself, Mrs. Carrie, is here to unchain your brain.
Hi, this is Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You're listening to Mistress Carrie.
This is Dennis Leary. You are listening to my favorite, Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is Corey from Stone Sour, and you're listening to, you have the privilege of listening to Mistress Carrie. Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
Mr. Mark Tremonti.
How you doing, Mistress Carrie?
I've been trying to get you on the show for a while. Welcome back to Boston.
I'm on your show whenever you want.
You've been very busy. We have a lot of stuff to talk about.
Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I spent a lot of time during the pandemic talking to Myles, and I found out the only reason he never wanted to do the interviews with me when you guys are out on the road is because he rests his voice. I used to think it was a personal thing. You're always willing to talk to me. He wasn't. Now I know why.
You know what? I'll talk to you all day long. I don't worry about my voice going because I don't sing every night.
Yeah, he definitely uses that voice a lot. So I'm very willing to give him the vocal rest. Can't wait to see the show.
Absolutely.
Congratulations on Pawns and Kings.
Thank you.
When I talked to Myles, obviously we were kind of in the throes of, the world being crazy. A lot of bands tried to do one of two things: echo the craziness that was happening or give fans a distraction from the craziness. What was your mindset working on these songs?
When we got into this record, I had already put out a Tremonti record and the Tremonti Sing Sinatra record. So I got really busy. I think for the first 6 months of the COVID lockdowns and whatnot, I was just like everybody else, depressed and didn't want to do much. And then I snapped out of it and got super busy. So I've been, by the time we got the Pawns and Kings, I had already been on extensive tours and recorded records. So I'm just back to normal with this record.
You had 6 months to unplug your life in a way you probably haven't since you were a teenager. How did the family react to Dad being around all the time?
It definitely had its silver linings. I had a baby girl during COVID, so that was amazing being home for her entire life up until, a year and a half. And, I got to be handyman at home and played a lot of sports with the kids in the yard. And, there was definitely good parts of that lockdown. It was a lazy man's dream come true. You could just sit around and do whatever the hell you want all the time. But, I only did so much of that. I tried to stay busy.
I've always said that, if projects that you wanted to get done didn't get done by the end of COVID, it's not because you didn't have the time. It's because you're lazy.
Absolutely. 100%.
Tell me about the honeydew list at home. Guys like Mike Mushok from Stain and Saint Asonia told me he tiled the bathroom. Did you discover a new skill that you might not have known you had before?
Yeah, I had my friend who's a contractor come over to my house, and I went through the house and showed him all the stuff I needed to fix. And he'd be like, all right, you need this for that, you need that for that. And I would make this big list of like 28 things I needed to do and fixed it all. I painted my entire house. I painted the entire exterior of my house. That took, I don't know, it probably took 3 weeks to do it, it was fun. I had fun. It's like, I found out that I love pressure washing. It's such a immediate, satisfying thing to do. Painting's the same way. So, some of it was great. I would just put my headphones on or my earplugs in, listen to some Frank Sinatra and paint the house. It was great.
You and I have talked about our shared Italian upbringing, and there are some things when you're Italian that you don't sass. And you don't F with Sinatra. Talk to me about the pressure of not screwing up this Tremonti Sings Sinatra record, because as an Italian guy, the bar is high for you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, a few years back, I would listen to Frank Sinatra and just sing along. And I was like, you know what? I had one of those nights where I just went way down the rabbit hole and listened to a bunch of tracks. And just like when I was a young guitar player, I want to play guitar like this person. I said, I want to sing like Frank Sinatra. So I practiced for years and then didn't know if I was ever going to do anything with it. And the only reason I had the balls to do it is because I did it for charity. I think when you do something for charity, you can do whatever it is you want. Nobody's going to come down on you for it. What are they going to say? You did this terribly. You raised $50,000 terribly. Nobody's ever going to say that. So when I went into the studio, all my friends were saying, aren't you terrified? You're going to be stepping into the studio with Frank Sinatra's band, singing his parts. And I said, I'm not. I can't wait to do it. I've practiced harder for this than anything I've ever practiced in my life. I couldn't spend another minute preparing for it. And like I said, we're doing it for charity. So whatever happens, happens. It was, it's probably one of the most proud moments I've had in my career.
The artwork for the album in front of the old neon signs, is that at the Neon Graveyard in Vegas?
It is. Absolutely. It's a great place. Perfect place for a photo shoot for this record.
I went there the last time that I was in Vegas because I just thought, wow, that would be really cool. And walking around, there were people taking wedding photos and Instagram influencers taking selfies. And when I saw that artwork, I was like, that's got to be where he took that picture.
100%. We shot there, and we also shot, what casino was it? I forget it. Wherever Frank Sinatra had his personal dressing room, I think his manager said, Frank won't play here unless he has a suitable dressing room. So they built him this awesome green room, and it's got Frank Sinatra on the door. And I don't think anybody's really allowed in there except for, on special tours. And I got to go in there and take photos in his dressing room. It's funny to see how he had it set up. He likes carpet around the toilet. So imagine a carpeted toilet, all the piss and for some reason he liked it. So it was a carpeted bathroom. He had the bottle of Jack Daniels, Frank Sinatra Jack Daniels sitting on the counter in front of his mirror, pictures of Ava Gardner on the walls. It was pretty cool.
Do you mind talking about the inspiration for doing all of this charity work and talking about your daughter Stella and how you got inspired to get involved?
Absolutely. So when I was singing along with Frank Sinatra, I didn't know what I was going to do with it until my daughter was diagnosed with Down syndrome before she was born. And then I had read so many books about how charitable Frank Sinatra was. He raised over $1 billion for charity. And I thought, why don't I do a record and raise money and awareness for Down syndrome? Because that's going to be my new life's purpose. That's really my new life's purpose. We've almost raised $1 million so far since the record's come out. So we've made some big movements. We've got some serious talks going on with some, that I don't know if I'm allowed to reveal it yet, but there's some programs we might be putting together that are going to really be game changers.
Not only is it your life's purpose, but now you're asking other people to take a chance for charity. And I wanted to talk to you about this because when you and John Connolly made that video, part of my heart sunk for John because you challenged John from Seven Dust to run the Boston Marathon for you.
Absolutely.
Now, when you said you can do anything for charity and no one can criticize you for, how poorly you do it, in 2019, I ran the Boston Marathon for a veterans charity. And I finished in 6 hours, 24 minutes, and 50 seconds.
Wow.
Horrible.
Or, it's what, 16, how many miles, 30 miles or something?
How do you not know how long it is? You asked John to run it for you.
How many miles is it?
26.2.
That's crazy. To do that at all is really, really impressive. I couldn't do it.
And I had a lot of medical kind of problems as a kid. So I've read some articles with you talking about what it's like to be a parent and have a child having to go through surgeries and stuff. And I had a lot of surgeries as a kid, and never in a million years, especially growing up around here, I'm the one broadcasting from the finish line of the marathon, and everybody at one point or another that grew up here has been drunk on the sideline of the marathon going, I could run that someday. I did it. It's hell on earth.
Oh, I'm sure.
So we need to talk about John's challenge from you, because I have begun to talk to some of your mutual friends, and there's a prediction. I want to see where you fall on it. John and you have been friends for years and years. You might as well be family now.
Absolutely.
And he has become a machine.
Oh, he is. He's addicted.
And so I talked to Chris Daughtry. I talked to Clint Lowry recently. And we talked about this marathon challenge and John. Do you think John is going to finish the marathon in less than half the time it took me to finish it?
I think if that's possible, yes. I think whatever he does for his, I think he's going to finish in the top of his age group. I think he's going to, if that's how they rank it, because he's been doing marathons and for years now, and he always crushes it. And John is driven. He's disciplined. He's nuts about it. When you see him now, he's just like you said, he's a machine. He lives for it. So when we're on tour, I'll be like, hey man, let's go check out a movie, whatever it is. No, I'm training. I'm swimming 20 miles at the Y. He will not do anything but train. So this is a challenge for him, but it's also, I think, a challenge he's dying to take on, because in the marathon world, the Boston Marathon is it. So I think he's going to absolutely kill it.
There's only a couple ways you can run Boston. You can qualify, depending on gender, age group, whether or not you're in a wheelchair heat or something like that. And then you can get a bib running for charity, which is how I got my bib. My finishing time would not qualify an 80-year-old woman to run the Boston Marathon. I'm not kidding. I looked it up.
Hey, but you did it.
I did it, and I finished. So The question I'm going to have for the musicians I talk to between now and Marathon Monday is, will John Connolly be able to run the marathon twice in the time it took me to run it once? What's your answer, Mark Tremonti?
Yeah. Yes. What kind of a friend would I be if I said no?
Well, considering you asked him to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I have all the confidence in the world that he's going to come out of that with just pride and kicking its ass.
Are you coming to Boston to cheer him on? Are you going to be here?
I'll be on tour. Yeah, but I mean, I would love to be at that finish line.
Well, we will be there for you. Marathon Monday is such a special day for us growing up here that it's the third in the Boston trifecta of drinking days: St. Patrick's Day, opening day at Fenway, Marathon Monday.
Nice.
So we will be there for you.
Well, at the finish line, have some shots ready for him. He'll deserve it.
I thought of you recently. I don't know if you saw the story that Steve Vai got reunited with his Swiss cheese guitar from the 80s. Did you see that story?
I did. I saw it. Well, I saw a mention of it, but I didn't read it.
So it got stolen from him in the 80s, and then somebody found it in a family attic in Mexico, that somebody had bought it a while ago and it got stashed. And it reminded you of the story you told me years ago about the guitar that you got stolen in Boston.
Yes. Oh yeah. That was a terrible time. We were back then, we were kids, so we would put all the radio station stickers on our van, or on our trailer, so everybody knew that this was a band touring around. And when we woke up to get in the van, we just saw the lock popped out onto the ground where the car was parked, and I had the guitar I grew up playing in there that I babied. It didn't have a scratch on it, and it was a heartbreaker for sure.
And you haven't gotten it back yet, because the last time you and I talked about this, that we were trying to get everybody to scour internet listings to see if they could find it, because that's what happened with Steve Vai.
Yeah, I mean, that would be amazing. I mean, the only way I could tell if it was mine is there's a little sticker of the guitar shop, I think, under the pickup. So that's, and what was the name of that guitar shop? It was in Detroit. I'd figure it out, but that would be amazing.
Can we talk about you growing up? And, you do sing, obviously, Sinatra very well. You are a songwriter and you're also a guitar player. Which one of those things came first? Did you walk around the house singing? Did you always write poems, or was the guitar your gateway into being a musician?
It was 100% guitar, and then vocal melodies came. I loved just humming different melodies, and I never thought I was a good singer for years and years and years and years and years. I still don't think I'm a great singer. I think I do the big band jazz thing better than I do the rock thing, to be honest with you. But that came in time. Singing, when you're a songwriter and you sing constantly while you're writing songs, you just keep developing better pitch and better control of your voice. And the guitar was really definitely the gateway to all that.
Do you still have the first guitar you ever played? And was it electric or acoustic?
It was electric. I had a black Les Paul imitation. It was called Tara, Tara, and I bought it for $10. Yeah, from a buddy of mine at school. He said, "I'll sell you my guitar for $10 if you join my band." So his name was Jeff Blake, one of my friends in Detroit. So I joined the band, and he taught me a little bit, and here we are.
Do you still have it?
I don't. I traded it. I think most young guitar players, they want to get the next best thing. So I traded that guitar in. I think I sold it for $100. So I made 10 times my investment on it. And then I bought a Tokai, a Japanese, more of like a single cutaway guitar. I'm sorry, a double cutaway guitar. And then from the Tokai, I sold that to get the Les Paul studio model. That was the one that got stolen.
I have a theory about music that there's a couple phases of your musical journey. When you're a kid, you get gifted music, the soundtrack of your childhood. So whatever your parents listen to, the older siblings, your cool uncle. And then there's a line in the sand where you get exposed to something and you make the choice that that's what I like. And your musical life changes. So what was the soundtrack to your childhood? And then what was it that you first claimed as your music?
Yeah. So growing up, my dad had records with, like Joe Cocker and Iron Butterfly, Deep Purple. My mother loved Rod Stewart. She listened to Rod Stewart all the time. And then, in the car, I absolutely love 70s soft rock. It's, the Jerry Raffertys of the world and Michael McDonald and all that stuff. Seals and Cross, all that stuff is the best to me. And then one day, as you're growing up, you're a kid, you're trying to find your way. All the kids were listening to the Beastie Boys. I remember there was like a group, one side of the group was like Beastie Boys, and the other side of the people were listening to like alt rock, like Depeche Mode and stuff. So I was more on the Beastie Boys side until one night I couldn't fall asleep and I borrowed my brother's record. I said, "Hey man, what's that song I keep hearing about a sanitarium?" And he gave me the Master of Puppets record. And from that moment on, it was like a needle in my vein. I just could not get enough of it. And that was it. That was the turning point.
Younger people, especially people that get their music digitally now, they don't define their identity the way that you're talking about back then when we were growing up. The music you listened to said everything about who you were as a person.
Yeah, there's definitely groups. It was, in our schools back then. Well, a lot of times you had the football players and the jock folks, and you had the musicians. And where I was from in Detroit, it wasn't, everybody listened to rock there. It seemed like when I moved down to Florida, at first I didn't like it because at my school nobody listened to rock. Nobody, not a single person. I'd go in there and you'd have these kids blasting all their big bass stereos with whatever was on the radio at the time. There was people listening to like the CC Music Factory and Janet Jackson, like acting tough, listening to that. I'm like, what is going on here?
You're like, dude, I'm from Detroit. We grew up listening to Nugent and Alice Cooper.
Yeah, it was a way different scene. But that being said, imagine moving to Florida from Detroit with all your musical roots and your guitar and not fitting in right away. And that's when I became a songwriter, because I had all the time in the world to spend by myself going, these kids don't know what music is good. I'm going to show them what. So that's when I bought my 4-track and learned how to write songs.
I always preface this question by saying I have no musical ability whatsoever. My musical career ended with the clarinet and the marching band in high school. But I'm surrounded by musicians and songwriters, and I'm fascinated by the process of it. So when you go to sit down to write a song, is it the riff first, the lyric first, the melody first? Like how does it start?
It starts different every time. Hopefully it does. If you're going about it the same way all the time, you're going to start doing the same thing. So I try to get different things to inspire me. If I'm just sitting there with a guitar, the guitar is going to come first and the melody is going to come second. Lyrics will come last usually. Sometimes lyrics come along with the melody if you're lucky. But sometimes I could be walking or sitting in a restaurant and you hear something on the radio and you're like, wow, that would have been cool if it did this or it did that. And you're going over it in your head and you're like, all right, let me try to use whatever inspiration that was to write what I want to write. And maybe the melody came first in that instance, but mainly I like to go online and just find a drum loop or program a drum loop and just go for it. That way the music's coming first. I'm trying to spit out melodies as soon as I can. If I've got a great musical piece that can't fit a melody, it's not as important to me as a piece that can fit melody. Melody to me is by far the most important thing for any song. More important than the lyric, more important than the music.
When you look at songwriting as a craft, doesn't really matter the type of music, right? So the CNC Music Factory in Florida, whatever it is that you're listening to, it's been proven over and over again that a good song is a good song is a good song.
Yeah.
So rather than ask a favorite song, favorite album question, which anyone that loves music, it's near impossible, I ask this craft question. Can you give me an example of a song, regardless of artist or era, that you think is perfectly crafted? that you covet and go, man, I wish I wrote that song. That is what songwriting is. But then you got to tell me why.
I think Leonard Cohen, Hallelujah, could be one of the best written songs of all time. I think the lyrics are absolutely genius. The melody is so emotional. It's just such a, it just borders on this religious experience when you hear that song. It's just deep thing. It's just hard to explain. It's this magical thing that music does, and that's a perfect example of something that is intangible that can mean so much to you.
When it comes to guitar playing, right? I told Myles when he and I talked last that he's got this uncanny knack of surrounding himself with some of the best players out there, you included.
Now Myles is an incredible guitar player himself. He's I think there's been quotes from me and Slash at some point saying that Myles is the best guitar player in the band. He's really, really great. And, he'd be much better than me at sitting in with like a jazz group and just comping chords and following charts and all that kind of thing. He's much more of a theory-based player, and he's got great feel and very, very intelligent guitar player.
I asked him when it comes to writing songs with you and with Slash, he was like, no, Slash is a riff master. Like I would not. And I was like, what would Slash do if you brought him a riff? And he was like, he'd probably laugh and pat me on the head and say, oh, that's cute, Myles. Then I talked to Slash and he was like, I totally would not do that.
Myles writes great riffs. He's, I say in interviews more and more that my producer, when me and Myles present music, he's like, it's hard to tell who's writing what these days. He's like, when I hear a heavy riff, I immediately think it's Mark. And then I hear this, this other atmospheric melodic thing, and I think it's Myles, but it's Mark. So it's, I think the more you work with other artists, the more you you're working you're trying to do what's right for the band. And I think you just kind of learn from one another what works, and you pick up each other's kind of influences and skills.
Early in the pandemic, I sat down and had a really long conversation with Nuno Betancourt, who's from here, obviously. And we had nothing else to do, so we talked for hours about really nerdy guitar stuff. And I bring it up because you're on tour with Mammoth WVH and with Wolfgang. Nuno told me a story about early on in Extremes days that Dweezil Zappa brought him to a Van Halen rehearsal. And Eddie Van Halen invited him to play his rig. And Nuno described it as, finally, I'm going to play Eddie's guitar, Eddie's strings, Eddie's pedals, Eddie's amps, cables, all of it. I'm going to live out my dream of sounding like Eddie Van Halen. And his soul was crushed because he sounded like Nuno Betancourt.
Yeah.
And that got me talking to guitar players about tone and feel. And so I wanted to talk to you about where you think a guitar player's tone comes from.
Guitar player's tone comes from his fingers, for sure. I think I just had this conversation earlier today about, I forget what guitar player it was, playing on these different amps and always sounding the same. But I think 80 to 90% of it's in your fingers. I think if you throw yourself on a Dumble amplifier, you're going to sound different than a high gain PV or something. But for the most part, it's your fingers. And it's funny, you talk about him plugging into Eddie's rig. I just spoke to Wolfie the other day and I said, hey man, do you still have that, your dad's Marshall from, I'm talking like the running with the devil kind of tone. And he's like, yeah, I still have it. I actually used it on the new record I just recorded. So people are searching for that Brown sound. Wolfie just recorded with it on his new record. So that's that's insane. I also got to see, the Van Halen guys rehearse with Eddie right there in the room and heard his tone. And he was playing through his 5150, maybe 5153 at the time or whatnot, but he sounded like Eddie. He sounded like Eddie on his old Marshalls. It's his fingers.
When you look at the passing of someone like Eddie, or you look at the more recent passing of Jeff Beck, can it even be calculated the influence on your instrument that those two individuals specifically had on guitar playing.
No, it's crazy. I mean, Eddie Van Halen could be the most famous guitar player of all time. I think, the most recognizable player. He was just a game changer. And I remember the exact second I heard the news. I think it's just like one of those moments. It's like, do you remember when you turned on the news, you heard about 9/11? You know exactly how, where you were. Same thing when I heard about Eddie's passing. And Jeff Beck, he's on the Mount Rushmore of everybody's guitar list of best guitar players ever. He's irreplaceable. There's nobody else. I've never heard anybody say, yeah, he sounds like Jeff Beck. Nobody says that, he was he was one of the most emotive players ever. And I saw him live in Orlando at the House of Blues. And it was crazy how emotional you get when you watch somebody that good play.
The day that Eddie passed, I had just finished an interview with Kevin Martin from Candlebox. We literally said goodbye, got done, and the news broke. And I called him right back because I was like, I have to get I can't not talk to you about this news that just happened. He told me a really funny story that he got invited years ago to play on a last-minute golf foursome. And they said, oh, yeah, this guy, and Ed. And they didn't tell him who Ed was.
Wow.
And Eddie showed up with his golf club seat belted into the passenger seat of a Ferrari. And I was like, if that's not an Eddie Van Halen story.
I had no idea he played golf at all or had golf clubs. That's awesome.
Yeah, in a convertible Ferrari, seat belted into the passenger seat. So when you talk about where were you, everybody knows where they were that day.
Well, yeah, I was on my bike. I was just riding my bike and got my phone buzzed, and I checked it out, and it just one of those things where you almost faint. It was like getting kicked in the chest for sure. It's horrible.
Well, before I let you go, I want to circle back about the marathon real quick. One of the things that I did to train and to prepare, because I think music people do everything kind of with music in mind, is that I prepared a very specific playlist and trained with that playlist so that certain songs would come up at certain points, because I'm not a machine like John Connolly. So I needed the motivation of having certain songs at certain points in the run to help me. And I had 3 of your songs on the soundtrack.
That's an honor.
Ties That Bind, Come to Life, and Before Tomorrow Comes. There will never be a day that I don't hear those songs and I will know exactly where I was on the course.
That's amazing.
It literally, I can feel the pain and agony.
And you're like, I hate these songs now. They remind me of.
Are you playing any of those songs tonight?
Before Tomorrow Comes is in the set list for sure.
Okay.
Tonight.
That song, I will be feeling the pain of finishing the marathon when you play that song tonight.
That's number 4 in the set list tonight.
All right. Well, I will be there. I'm psyched to. This is the first time I'm going to see this new venue, Roadrunner. It's nice, right?
It's definitely, it's awesome. It's great.
I will see you tonight. I'm so excited to be able to hear some of the new songs live for the first time. And I'm really glad that we got to catch up. And thank you for challenging John to tackle our beloved marathon.
Thank you for talking about it. And hopefully people go and donate to the cause in his honor. I think, I think most people can just go to Tremonti. The Take a Chance for Charity.org.com and support John through there. So let's raise some money.
I'll put the link right here in the interview so that everybody can find it easy.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
All right. We'll see you tonight. I'm so excited.
See you tonight.
There he is, the one and only Mark Tremonti. If you check out the show notes of this episode, you're going to find the link to the corresponding playlist. And in that playlist is a bunch of Mark's music, including a lot of those Frank Sinatra covers that he recorded for charity. In the show notes, you're also going to find the link to John Connolly's fundraiser for the Boston Marathon, And if you can, please make a generous donation. Running the Boston Marathon, I don't care how good a shape you're in, is tough. You're also going to find all of the links to find Mark Tremonti online and Alter Bridge online as well. And you're also going to find all of the Mistress Carrie links too. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, share, and like the Mistress Carrie podcast. New full-length episodes come out every Wednesday. Plus, every weekday, you get the Sit Rep. The Situation Report gives you all of your rock news, music headlines, entertainment info in just about 5 minutes. Plus, you never know when we're going to release a bonus episode. And you can join me live every Tuesday night at 8:30 Eastern for my video show on my official Facebook page, Cocktails in the War Room. You'll find all of those episodes, all of the details about the podcast, and so much more at mistresscarrie.com. And don't forget to check out the shop, the Mistress Carrie Podcast, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network.
This is the Ugly Things Podcast, and I'm your host, Mike Stacks. That's right, Ugly Things Magazine, your source for the very best in 60s beat, garage, and psychedelic music since 1983, is now also a podcast. We'll bring you interviews and stories about some of the most exciting, overlooked, and influential bands from the 1960s, 70s, and beyond. In November 1964, the moment happens. John Cale meets Lou Reed.
A mere hummingbird's fart may well have set its principles along differing paths.
Very well put.
Articulate, huh?
Well, that's why you're a writer, Phil. It's all about wild sounds from past dimensions when rock and roll was young, daring, dangerous, and vital.
Quite often we used to be playing on stage and a fight used to break out. And really, it's just bodies and people flying about. So it's quite rough,
And hear insightful discussions with renowned rock journalists.
I was rejected from trying to write for the school newspaper, and in retaliation, they spelled my name Jarvie Kubernick in the yearbook.
Don't go changing, Harvey.
You're doing it f***ing wrong.
It's just nice to get the real stories down while they're still here.
Yeah, absolutely. Ugly Things, now on the Pantheon Network.